Volker Turk, who you all know. Then immediately following the guest briefing, our colleagues from the Department of Economic and Social Affairs will be here to brief on the launch of the World Social Report 2024, entitled Social Development in Times of Converging Crises, a Call for Global Action. And last, at 1:30 p.m., there will be a briefing by the Special Rapporteur on Trafficking in Persons, especially women and children, Siobhan Mulally. And tomorrow at 11 a.m., there will be a briefing here by the Special Rapporteur on the Promotion and Protection of the Right to Freedom of Opinion and Expression, Irene Khan. And at 2 p.m., there will be a joint briefing by the Special Rapporteurs on the rights to food, water, and housing, and those are Michael Fakhri, Pedro Arojo Agudo, and Balakrishna Rajagopal. The Secretary General said that he is alarmed by today's IPC report findings that high displacement and restrictions on humanitarian aid flows mean that the people of Gaza are facing catastrophic levels of hunger. 1 year into the conflict, famine looms. This is intolerable, the Secretary General said. Mr. Guterres said that crossing points must be open immediately, bureaucratic impediments must be removed, and law and order must be restored so that UN agencies can deliver life-saving humanitarian assistance. Earlier today, the World Food Programme and the Food and Agriculture Organization said that the latest findings of the Integrated Phase Classification Report, collecting the work of 16 UN agencies and NGOs, make clear that the risk of famine persists across the whole Gaza Strip. Given the recent surge in hostilities, there are growing concerns that this worst-case scenario may materialize. Between September and October 2024, the whole territory is classified in IPC Phase 4, emergency. About 1.84 million people across the Gaza Strip are experiencing high levels of acute food insecurity, classified in IPC Phase 3, crisis, or above, including nearly 133,000 people facing catastrophic food insecurity, which is IPC Phase 5. Acute malnutrition is 10 times higher than before the escalation of the hostilities. The report adds that nearly the entire population has been displaced multiple times, risking injuries or death from shelling and aerial bombardments, while many vulnerable groups are unable to relocate or find safe shelter. The majority are living in temporary makeshift camps with an alarming density of almost 40,000 people per square kilometer. Our colleagues from the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs warned that the ongoing Israeli military operations in northern Gaza are putting tens of thousands of civilians in grave danger. OCHA stresses once again that civilians in the north and across Gaza must be protected. Moreover, the military offensive in northern Gaza is also choking off people's access to the essentials for their survival, including water. Intense hostilities, evacuation orders, and loss of access to numerous water, sanitation, and hygiene facilities in northern Gaza have rendered a number of systems for water production and wastewater collection inoperable. In Jabalia and Beit Lahiya, water production from municipal wells is currently at zero. That's according to our partners, who are also doing everything possible to provide access to water for people throughout Gaza. As of a week ago, they reported that 638 cubic meters of water were being distributed in northern Gaza on a daily basis through water trucking. For your reference, daily water distribution throughout all of Gaza prior to October 2023 was 380,000 cubic meters. Meanwhile, in central Gaza, we and our humanitarian partners working to support water, sanitation, and hygiene services there are preparing for winter and taking urgent steps to mitigate the risk of flooding. These include rehabilitating wastewater pumping stations in Deir el-Bala and removing solid waste and cleaning stormwater channels in An-Nusayrat refugee camp. Partners are also rehabilitating drainage systems and working to procure dewatering pumps. Also in central Gaza, the World Health Organization reports that the second round of the polio vaccination campaign there concluded yesterday, with more than 181,000 children receiving the vaccine and over 148,000 children getting vitamin A supplements. 8 health facilities in central Gaza will continue to provide polio vaccines for families who are unable to bring their children to be vaccinated over the past 3 days. The second round of the polio vaccination campaign is expected to start in southern Gaza tomorrow. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, OCHA warns that Israeli settler violence in the context of the ongoing olive harvest season is threatening people's safety and livelihoods. Since the beginning of the month, OCHA has documented 32 attacks by Israeli settlers, during which 39 Palestinians harvesting olives were injured, and about 600 trees and saplings were vandalized, sawn off, or stolen. The peacekeeping mission in Lebanon, UNIFIL, reports that earlier today, an uncrewed aerial vehicle of unknown origin approached one of the mission's maritime task force ships off the southern Lebanese coast. In accordance with procedures, electronic countermeasures were used to bring down the UAV. The mission is investigating the incident. UNIFIL says that yesterday marked the highest number of violations of Lebanese airspace by the Israeli Defense Force in a 24-hour period since the 8th of October 2023, with 60 violations. Strikes were reported in areas across Lebanon, including the Bekaa Valley, Sidon, and Nabateh. Strikes by Hezbollah into northern Israel are also continued, including towards Haifa. In addition, over the past 24 hours, peacekeepers continued to observe exchanges of fire across the Blue Line, with impacts in the areas of Aita Shab, Meis al-Jabal, Markaba, Et Taibe, and Raban Talatin, as well as continued military activity by the IDF within the mission's area of operations. Some of this activity continued to take place close to UN positions and compromised the safety and security of peacekeepers. Yesterday, the mission observed an IDF tank firing at a watchtower at a UN position near Kfar Killa. The tower was damaged and cameras were destroyed. Fortunately, no peacekeepers were injured. We continue to protest these actions with the Israeli authorities and remind all actors of their obligations to ensure the safety and security of UN personnel and respect the inviolability of UN premises at all times. On the humanitarian front, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says that escalating airstrikes are severely impacting families across the country. Following deadly strikes on the city of Nabateh yesterday that also killed members of the local relief team at the municipality and the mayor, the humanitarian coordinator in Lebanon, Imran Riza, called for the protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure. Mr. Riza said that healthcare facilities, mosques, historical markets, residential complexes, and government buildings are being reduced to rubble, adding that displaced families continue to feel at risk even after fleeing to safer areas. According to Lebanese authorities, more than 2,300 people have been killed and over 11,000 people have been injured since October 2023, while more than 1.2 million people have been displaced. Mr. Riza reiterated that civilians must be allowed to seek safety, humanitarian relief must be facilitated without obstruction, and humanitarian workers must be able to carry out their duties in safety. Bless you, whoever that was. The UN Refugee Agency says that in Lebanon, over 260,000 Lebanese people and refugees are being assisted with some type of cash assistance, including cash for shelter support. Access to safe shelter continues to be a pressing need for those displaced inside Lebanon. In Syria, UNHCR updates that, according to the relevant authorities, over 405,000 people, both Lebanese and Syrian, are estimated to have crossed from Lebanon to Syria. Approximately 60% of total new arrivals are under the age of 18. The majority of new arrivals, primarily women and children, are struggling to meet their basic needs. People are arriving exhausted, scared, in desperate need of help, arriving in a country that has been suffering from its own crisis and violence for more than 13 years. UNHCR and partner organizations continue to have a presence at the Syrian crossing points and provide assistance to new arrivals. For its part, the UN Population Fund has distributed 2,520 dignity kits, and through its partner, the Syrian Arab Red Cross, to women and girls at the 4 newly established border health protection support points, which are in the Homs, Tartus, Daraa, and rural Damascus governorates. If someone is online, could you please close off your mics? The International Organization for Migration today said it is stepping up its efforts to assist communities devastated by widespread flooding in Chad, which has displaced over 13,000 people and left nearly 2 million in urgent need of aid. In N'Djamena alone, more than 5,000 people have been displaced, making up almost half of the total number affected. IOM has so far assisted 14,000 people, providing shelter, essential household items, and sanitation support, while working closely with local authorities and partners to address the most urgent needs of the displaced. The floods, concentrated in the capital and southern regions across the Chari River, have severely restricted access to clean water and sanitation, raising the risk of waterborne diseases. The UN Assistance Mission in Afghanistan expresses its deep concern over disturbing reports of an incident that took place on the 14th and 15th of October in Sistan province, in the Kalagan border area of Iran, with allegations that a large group of Afghan migrants were fired upon, resulting in deaths and injuries. UNAMA calls for thorough and transparent investigations into the alleged incident and reminds all parties that the rights of migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers are protected by international law. The Office of Rule of Law and Security Institutions today released the first report on women in the defense sector. The study examines the advancements, barriers, and future opportunities for women's participation in the defense sectors. According to the report, although progress has been made, gender equality in the defense sector remains elusive. The report also includes recommendations to member states and the international community on how to strengthen equal opportunity for women in defense. The report was developed in line with Recommendation 17 of the Report of the Secretary General on Strengthening Security Sector Reform. It's available online, and we have cards here that you can scan to access the report. The UN Development Programme and the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative today released the 2024 Multidimensional Poverty Index, which finds that 1.1 billion people across 112 countries live in multidimensional poverty. Over half of the 1.1 billion poor, 584 million people, are children under the age of 18. The report says that nearly 500 million of the poor live in countries exposed to violent conflict, where poverty rates are almost 3 times as high compared to countries not affected by conflict. The cycle of poverty and conflict is hindering and even reversing hard-won progress to reduce poverty. The report calls for specialized development and early recovery actions addressing poverty in conflict settings. There's more on UNDP websites. And today is the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. In a message, the Secretary General says that poverty is a global plague, affecting hundreds of millions of people around the world. Eradicating poverty is an essential foundation for humane, dignified societies that leave no one behind, he says. That's it for me. Any questions before we get to our guest? Yes, Edie.
Thank you, Farhan. Does this Secretary General have any comment on reports that the head of Hamas may have been killed in southern Gaza, and whether this could have an impact on the continuation of the war?
Well, from our side, we don't have any particular comment because we have no way of confirming these reports at this point. Obviously, we're monitoring what the relevant information is. From our standpoint, if there are any developments that can help bring about any ceasefire and indeed any improved access, humanitarian access to Gaza, we want to see those happening, and we're working on those independently of this latest information. Benny?
Just to follow up on that, it has been widely reported and confirmed by the U.S. that Sinwar has been the stumbling block to a ceasefire and release of hostages deal. Do you have any comment because of the reports on that?
Well, obviously, there have been any number of stumbling blocks. We've said many times that there are times when it seems we're getting closer to a ceasefire, but the point is to actually get to that point. And right now, as I said at the start of the briefing, one thing that the Secretary General wants to make sure of is that there is improved humanitarian access, including to northern Gaza, given the tremendous amount of humanitarian needs at present.
And the release of 101 hostages? You forgot.
Well, so we certainly have been calling again and again for the unconditional release of all hostages, and we want that to happen, again, independently of all of the other events. Yes, Michelle.
Sorry, same topic. Just to ask a little more bluntly, Israel has been retaliating in Gaza for the October 7 attacks with the intention of dismantling Hamas. It appears that they've now killed the leader of Hamas. What would be the Secretary General's message to Israel now?
Our message has not changed. We have wanted the fighting to be halted. We have wanted civilians to be protected. We have, as I just mentioned, wanted the release of all of the hostages, and we've wanted improved humanitarian access through Gaza at a time when, as I said at the start, the risk of tremendous malnutrition and of famine are once again alarming. So we continue to want that. Our officials on the ground are continuing to push for that, and any development that can help push us along that way would be welcome. Yes, Gabriel.
Thanks, Farhan. On a separate topic, you mentioned that the another round of polio vaccines are going out in southern Gaza tomorrow, right? Yesterday, the Algeria's permanent representative asked a question I'd like your reaction to. He said, how is it possible that we can vaccinate these children, yet we cannot feed them? How can we secure trucks transporting vaccines, but those trucks cannot carry essential food? The inevitable conclusion is that this is a not collateral damage, but a deliberate, calculated Israeli policy of starvation. What would be the Secretary General's reaction to those questions posed by the Algerian permanent representative?
Well, I would just repeat what I said at the start of this briefing. What the Secretary General has made clear is that crossing points must open immediately, bureaucratic impediments must be removed, and law and order must be restored so that the UN agencies can deliver life-saving humanitarian assistance. If we can do this in short periods of circumstances and have small pauses that allow for polio vaccinations, surely we can expand on this to prevent starvation and indeed the possibility of death. Yes.
Just to follow up on that, Farhan, who should restore law and order?
Well, in this case, there needs to be a number of actions taken, not just, I mean, obviously there's responsibilities for Israel, given its role as the occupying power in this regard, but there needs to be security on the ground. The sort of bodies that had previously protected law and order on the ground are not there, and we need to find a way of reestablishing law and order at a time when criminal gangs and looters have also been creating problems in terms of aid distribution.
Is this a collective request to countries to get involved? I mean, are you suggesting that Israeli forces then accompany humanitarian aid into Gaza? What does this really look like when you say for the restoration of law and order? Who's going to do it and how?
Well,
Some
ultimately,
specifics.
we need to have there be forces on the ground that can ensure security. Normally, they have been Palestinian forces, but we'll have to see what can be worked out at the current at the current situation. Obviously, the thing that would help most is an end to the combat, which would then allow for there to be actual security restored on the ground. Yes.
Quickly. The US ambassador yesterday suggested that the Israeli military was going to look at a way to secure the routes using, well, to protect them from the criminal gangs or armed elements. Would that be satisfactory for the US? For the UN?
The UN is in touch with a number of different parties trying to see what arrangements can be made. We'll have to see what is an actual arrangement that would work on the ground.
Would there be any concerns about neutrality with that?
There's any number of concerns in terms of, like I said, what would work on the ground in terms of ensuring that there's safety and security, and that indeed people feel safe getting access to food and water. Yes, Stefano, and then we'll go to our guest.
Yes, Farhan. It's about UNIFIL. The Italian government is asking for the rule of engagement to be changed, and with the European and with other Europeans are proposing new rules. But I think that Secretary General that was asked before doesn't. It doesn't think he's the right answer to whatever is happening now. So can you clarify, is the Secretary General for or not the change of the rule engagements of UNIFIL?
Well, these are things that are discussed with the troop contributing countries, and we'll continue to engage with the troop contributing countries and see what is needed. But there's no changes that have been decided so far. Yes, sure.
Sorry, I just want one clarification, please, to Michelle's question earlier about if Mr. Sinmar's been killed, what the SG's message was. You said it hasn't changed, that you still want, ceasefire, hostages released, aid. But you also said any development that could push us along that way would be welcome. When you say any development, do you mean Mr. Sinmar's death? I just need clarity.
I've said it as clearly as I intend to say it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's go to our guest.